Joey,
You're gonna
is this
share
working?
me. Yeah. Hi.
Yeah, I'm going to share you with the world.
It's like communism, bro.
Hey, it's better than communism because you're not even getting paid.
Yeah, that's true. Then it's like slavery.
Ooh, that's a touchy subject, you know. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Had a great workout today. Played basketball at the gym. I'm pumped. I'm ready.
All right. Well, why are you here? Why did I choose you?
Because I asked you.
And probably because no one else said, probably because nobody else agreed to do it. You know, that's not true. Joey wants to do this. He enjoys he enjoys talking about this stuff, and you know he's sort of a Trump supporter. I mean, he likes Trump more than he likes the other guys, and you know, by extension, that means he has to like JD Vance.
Oh. Well, let's not push it now.
Well, you have to accept JD Vance. How's that sound?
Yeah, I have to tolerate him. This is what tolerance means. This is the true definition of tolerance. I have to tolerate JD Vance.
Such a tolerant person, Joey. Such a tolerant person.
You see how tolerant am I on the Timcast Discord?
You know, the benefit of being on screen with me here today is there's certain people that would want to talk and share their opinions while you're talking. You don't have to deal with right now.
Thank God for that. I'll have to deal with it later, though. Ugh.
If we're lucky, he'll be in the comment section, you know, sharing, you know, his opinions, which you can probably ignore if you want. You know, that's up to you.
Yeah, I'll ignore all the comments.
So, what do you expect we're gonna find tonight? What do you expect to see?
So, what I'm hoping for, since JD Vance is so JD Vance, like I'm just hoping that he has like a couple of things locked and ready to go, and I hope he touches on some points that Trump missed, like the unity ticket stuff. I hope he's capable of doing that, because I think Tim Walz is just I think he's gonna flounder. But I thought Kamala was gonna flounder too, but then again, Kamala had the questions beforehand, so you know, she probably had like 6 different answers rehearsed.
No. There's no way she had that many answers rehearsed. She can only handle 2 things at once. Montel and Willie Brown.
I bet you she could handle 3 things at once.
Oh, that might be testing her. She might start cackling.
Yeah, that nervous laughter. You could hear the tremble in her voice. It's just like, yeah, I hear that, and it's akin to like Hillary Clinton. You remember when Hillary Clinton used to fucking that thing she would the ululation she would make with her mouth, that type of shit. Oh, horrible.
Well, she did better than Nancy Pelosi does, though, right? You know, or Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley does that thing where she talks without moving her teeth open or closed. You know, so she's already doing better than that.
They're just not human beings.
Lizard people, isn't that right?
That's what David Icke would say.
Well, I mean, some people would say that. Not me. Some people would say that about us.
I wasn't convinced about Hillary Clinton being a lizard person until she, you remember that goblet thing she spit out into the water that she was drinking? What was that?
Yes.
I think she hatched an egg.
Is that how she hatches eggs?
I don't know. I'm not a lizard person. I just think that was an egg. It had to be an egg. You remember? I think when you, me, and Olivia were doing that show, and I said it, and you're like, you guys are like, what was that? And then I'm like, look up the video, and you guys looked up the video, and boom, like she just gave birth.
Well, we don't like thinking about such things, you know.
I don't either. But that convinced me that she was a lizard person, honestly.
And you're my conspiracy guy. I come to you when I need to know about a conspiracy, and you provided me no information here.
I think, well, Hillary is a lizard. Kamala is just a hoe. That's the best I got for you.
And you can't put a hoe in the White House.
Yeah, you can't even turn a hoe into a housewife, let alone a commander-in-chief. What's she going to do to negotiate? She's going to be like, listen, first one's free. Second one, you got to pay for.
Yeah, but who's paying for the second one? Yeah, you already got it the first time for free. You don't need to go back for seconds.
That's that's the flaw in her plan. I'm gonna negotiate with Putin. How?
He doesn't respect her.
Oh, he wouldn't. You did. I don't know. Putin wouldn't even do that for free.
I mean, what we saw news today that Iran decided to fire its ballistic missiles. Guess what?
Mm-hmm.
They fucked around and they found out. So we're going to see a lot of escalation from this. I'm certain of that. How is Kamala going to, on the world stage, handle this? That entire country doesn't respect women. So how is she going to negotiate this?
I believe it's going to be the same way Joe Biden negotiated. The handlers are going to handle it. Whoever this group of people are, like, I don't know who's currently making the decisions. We know it's not Joe Biden, but whatever, like, this group, I don't know, maybe it's like 3 to 5 people, whoever they are, they're going to handle it.
So Obama.
That's what a lot of people think. They think this is the third term. But in my opinion, I thought Obama's first term was George Bush's third term. So I don't know.
It's hard to separate out the deep state like that. I mean, they're all in cahoots.
Honestly,
right?
In my opinion,
they're all the same.
This is George Bush's fifth term. That's the way I see it. It's the fifth term of George Bush.
I know you've got an axe to grind against George Bush.
Oh, I hate George Bush.
That's fair.
Oh, Dick Cheney, I hate. I hate Dick Cheney. I think George Bush was basically Joe Biden.
Hey, Dick Cheney was a hero. He shot his friend in the face and got away with it. I mean, isn't that what we all want? Isn't that what we all want out of this world, Joey?
Is to shoot our friends in the face
and get away with it.
I bet you there's a lot of people that want to shoot me in the face.
Now, when you're talking about Kamala, that shooting in the face has an entirely different context.
Well, I guess that's what Vladimir Putin's going to figure out. Where do I go?
They tried the Russian P-tapes thing in 2016 against Trump. It could be a possibility with her.
Imagine like it just comes out that like Kamala got really drunk at one of these, like, I don't know, like G6 or some shit.
And did she ever go to a Diddy party?
Oh, come on. Probably. I think so. I mean, 768 dildos, she could handle at least 4 of them.
And she came back for the rest. She had to try them all,
Oh,
couldn't find the one that just fit right.
It's just like what's his name in Cinderella? He's just trying to slip her on every girl's foot. That's what it's like for her. She's trying to find the right slipper. Trying to find the right one that fits.
If only we weren't on YouTube, Joey, because I could make an inappropriate joke there, because she doesn't have to try just one at a time.
Well, we are on YouTube, but according to people in my Discord, it's also on X. So
yes, I figured out how to get it on X at the same time. I was unable to figure out the Rumble part of it in the time I had to set all this up. Which, by the way, guys, it was not decided that we were doing this until 5 p.m. my time. Which is Central time. So
I didn't get back to him until 7:30 my time, which is Eastern time. So I got back to him like an hour later because I was playing basketball, and I was like, oh, I probably should have checked my phone.
So yeah, I got this all set up, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I see people commenting on the things we're saying, so clearly it is working.
I don't see the comments because of the thing that you sent me to make this work. Yeah, it's cool. Well,
I mean, but you probably also don't have YouTube pulled up on another screen or anything either, so
maybe I should.
Guys, Joey is ignoring your comments. You should give him a hard time for that.
Oh, fuck. I feel so bad now. What is it?
So as we're getting closer to the debate time, I want to give you an opportunity. Joey, where can people actually find you? Because on this show, it's not always about me.
Well, if I could find, I gotta, man, I typed your shit in the YouTube the exact way it's supposed to, and they're like, okay, if I open this, okay, perfect. Oh, gotta listen to the ad.
You usually just type my name and it'll come up.
I did. I typed the name of the podcast.
No, my actual name. If you type my actual name, it'll come up. I found.
You know what? I didn't think about that.
But at the Quiet Part Pod, that's where you find me on YouTube.
Great, I got you guys right now at that link tree, moving at the speed of light.
Well,
and
light moves a little slower in your universe, apparently.
There in the comments. Listen, my universe. Sometimes, I'm an interdimensional traveler. Sometimes.
No, we only know one of those.
That's like when Kamala made her VP pick. Apparently, she was interdimensional traveling, according to her.
Well, I heard that today. She was in a weird place, apparently. Clearly, making the decision for this.
You know what it was?
This beta.
You know what it was?
Boy?
You know what it's like? It's like she had like the police lineup, and they had like 5 candidates there, and there was like it was like AOC or something. It was someone else, and then it was Josh Shapiro, and then Tim Walz. They were standing shoulder to shoulder, and she was tired and she was drunk, and she just looked and she was like, "I want him. I want Josh. I want Josh." And they're like, "That's not Josh. That's Tim." And she's like, "Oh, his name must be Tim Shapiro." So she picked him, and then she realized like a day later, "Holy shit, that's not Josh Shapiro." That's
well,
Tim
she
Walz.
does have a drinking problem, apparently.
They just got to deal with it now.
It's crazy. What do you expect from Tim Walz tonight? I mean, I asked you what you expected out of JD. What do you expect from Tim?
I expect him to. I honestly, I kind of expect him to act like a less coherent version of what Donald Trump was doing the first 50 minutes of that debate. Like, I think he's going to be very belligerent, except he's not going to really be nailing things like Donald Trump was. Trump was at least he was getting his talking points out. At the very least, I think went about the tactics a little wrong. He could have made that debate a slam dunk instead of a layup. He
does. He shouldn't fall for the bait. I know,
but I understand that as a New Yorker, I understand falling for the bait. It is so easy for me to fall for bait. I mean, you remember that dude that told me that I wasn't going to survive the apocalypse because I couldn't fix my fridge? I fell for the bait. I fell for the bait. Us New Yorkers fall for the bait. You can't challenge us like that.
Well, I get that.
I felt it. I felt that energy from him. He was getting mad. I could see it. He licked his lip. They'll do the little lip like smack, like, oh, this motherfucker.
See, I thought about setting up a bingo game, by the way.
Oh, should have had Olivia do that.
But see, here's the problem. I didn't want everyone to get alcohol poisoning.
Yeah, I don't even have any alcohol at home. I have to just take a sip of coffee each time.
Oh, I got to do a YouTube thing here, by the way. Thank you, Pat the Plumber, for the super chat. Joey can only hate chocolate pudding. Banned.
I just eat pudding.
Well, I won't say what you actually do eat.
Not on YouTube.
No, can't get away with it on YouTube. Can get away with it on X, but we're not just on X.
I'm not saying the people in the comments shouldn't say it if they know it, but I can't say it. So guys, we're getting closer to debate time. So I am going to say we are providing commentary. It's not just going to be turn the volume down and let them go. Now we are going to chime in where we hear something. I'm not going to call it fact checking, but there will be commentary. How's that sound? Vibe checking. We already talked about Kamala and the dildos, man. You're allowed to laugh at that, Joey. I mean, you really are. Oh, I was just checking back and forth with the thing, and it appears that if I'm not on the StreamYard page, I freeze.
Oh, interesting.
So I have to be very, very, very efficient when I check the comments.
I mean, you still moved around for me at least, but I mean,
interesting.
Maybe it's just your computer. That does happen,
Joey eats the cannoli. That's not true. That's fact check that, Sanoski. Fact check that. That's just not true.
I mean, I don't know if you eat the cannoli or not. and it looks like somebody has a message retracted. Somebody take their message away. And so mean. I'm not moderating this. Maybe I am. Honestly, I don't know.
Fact check.
They are asking for the fact check. I got to go find somebody that you chose not to eat the cannoli for.
That's some lore right there. You're digging in the lore. Has the debate started? I see.
It looks like we're getting close. It says 30 seconds. So
okay, yeah, they're just standing at the podium.
Let me prepare this, and we shall see if the internet magic actually happens here.
Can we do it? Yes, we can. Oh, I hear it. Does everyone else hear it, though? That's the question.
They have the serious sound going, too. Listen to that.
What type of music is this? I feel like I'm going to get ready for Pirates of the Caribbean.
I was going to say, it feels like I'm playing like a Legend of Zelda game, you know?
Yeah, right?
Riding along on the horse.
Tonight, with just over
I got a story for the commercial break, by the way.
All right, you remember that.
Who hope to become vice president
Take
of the
notes,
United
too.
States. Democratic Governor Tim
right.
Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio.
Now, this is likely the final debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states. CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate starts now.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take this country back.
And we are ready to continue to build the future together.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
This is a CBS News special, live from CBS News headquarters in New York. America Decides, the vice presidential debate.
Good evening. I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere
the whole world
near
knew
the
how
White House.
crazy Donald Trump was. This is true.
To them,
which is why this shit didn't happen under Trump.
He's unfit for the
gall of him to attack Trump's age.
What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw
have we seen
on
leadership
the
out of her?
coalitions to bring them
Ever.
together.
Back room.
Understanding that our allies matter.
She leads from the knees.
When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
He didn't answer
Governor,
the question.
Senator
Well, you
Vance
can't
is
negotiate
saying,
with enemies?
Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Haven't they already done a preemptive strike?
First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the
That's
debate.
what the
And
pages
thanks
were.
most importantly to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My
At least he
mother required
understands
food
that.
assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Well, I agree it's up to
Thank
Israel.
you, Senator. Governor
but we don't need to
Walz,
support
do you care
it.
to respond to any of the allegations?
They can take over the whole Middle East on their own
was in
dime.
office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place.
Wait,
so
whoa,
Iran
no,
is
no, no,
closer
no.
to a nuclear
We didn't
weapon
box
than they
them
were
in for
before
shit.
because of Donald
We
Trump's
allowed them to
fickle
get
leadership.
further and further in
And
their
when Iran
research under
shot down
Obama.
an American aircraft in international airspace,
basically
Donald Trump tweeted.
Like a
because that's
parent
the
telling their
standard
kid not to do
diplomacy of
something,
Donald
and the
Trump.
kid does it anyway.
And when Iranian
It's like,
missiles
if you follow
did
these rules,
fall
eventually you can
near
do the
US
thing.
troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off.
You can go to the
as
mall on
headaches.
Friday night if you just
Look, our
do your
allies
homework every day
understand
this week.
that
Like,
Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today,
that's
like
not-
you
that's
witnessed
not wrong.
in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator
Yeah,
Vance,
we need that
the
steady
U.S.
leadership
did
that
have a diplomatic
brought the
deal
pipeline
with
back
Iran
for
to temporarily
Russia.
pause
We need the
parts of
steady
its
leadership
nuclear
that
program,
pulled
and
out of
President
Afghanistan
Trump did exit that deal.
incorrectly and in
He
the worst ways
recently
possible,
said,
giving the
just
Taliban
5 days
countless
ago, the
amounts of
U.S. must now
armament.
make a diplomatic deal with
And
Iran
then-
because the
About Kamala's
consequences
top game.
are
Then we
impossible.
got to send more troops back
Did
to
he
the
make a
Middle East
mistake?
because
You
we
have
were
1 minute.
retarded.
Well, first of all,
in
Margaret,
pulling them
diplomacy
out.
is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz.
I'm not a JD Vance
fan. When did
but
Iran and
this dude's
Hamas and
on
their
point
proxies
right now.
attack Israel?
He's very
It
well
was
prepared.
during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
That and
we
the
have a lot to
craziness of
get to.
crossing the
Nora?
DMZ
Margaret,
alone.
thank you.
Right?
Let's turn now
No
to Hurricane
no president
Helene.
has ever
The
crossed that
storm
DMZ,
could become one of the
let
deadliest
alone
on
by
record.
himself.
More
He
than
didn't even have the Secret
160
Service detail.
people
Big,
are
big
dead,
storm.
and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes
Fuck
larger,
climate change.
stronger,
Run.
and more deadly
Run.
because of the historic
No,
rainfall.
science has proven
Senator
that
Vance,
to be
according to
false.
CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator,
Yeah.
what responsibility
just make numbers up.
would the Trump administration have
Hey,
to try
I
and
want
reduce
clean
the
air,
impact
clean
of
water just as
climate
much as
change?
everyone
I'll
else,
give you
but
2
we don't
minutes.
need to blame
Sure.
climate
So first
change
of all,
for this
let's
shit.
start with
Clean-
the hurricane.
clean
because
air and
it's an
clean water is very
unbelievable,
different than climate
unspeakable
change.
human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those
nice
innocent
trap.
people, our
Good
prayers
trap.
go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards,
I'm
to
happy
help
with the
people
private
in those
response
communities
that's being
rebuild.
led by
these are
Donald Trump
communities
with a
that I love. Some of
GoFundMe.
them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. And Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say,
Are they
Donald
crazy,
Trump and I
or
support
are we in
clean
a
air,
cycle?
clean water. We want
Just
the
normal.
environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America
In the
because
cleanest
we're
way
the cleanest
possible.
economy in the entire world.
Slick
What
answer.
have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually
he's killing
care
them on their
about
own
getting
arguments.
cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly
Stop
the opposite.
buying oil from
Governor
Venezuela.
Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
good
We
answer.
got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a
Ooh, he had to
horrific
agree.
tragedy
Awesome.
with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are
This
down
dude
there.
looks like a fucking
in
Futurama
contact with the
character.
governors. I serve as
Yeah,
co-chair of the Council
let's
of
chop the
Governors.
head
We
off,
work
put it in a
together on
jar.
these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship.
He can live forever
We
that
work
way,
together
right?
because all
In
of the
Minecraft.
governors and the emergency responders.
No,
on the ground.
Futurama. What
Those
was
happen
the
on
heads in the
front
jar?
end. The federal
no,
government
just that
comes in and
sentence
makes
you
sure
said
they're there
alone
that we
might have-
recover, but we're
Oh.
still in that phase where we need to
I'm
make
sorry.
sure that they're staying there,
I
staying
am, of
focused.
course,
Now,
talking
look,
about
coming back to
in the
climate
right
change
ways,
issue, there's no
as
doubt
they
this
said,
thing
roll on
roared
light.
onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax. and then joke that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration
that's
the
a true
Biden-Harris
statement, though.
administration, is we've seen
I
this
mean,
investment.
Investors
massive
along the
investments,
coast
biggest
would
in
not be investing the amount of money that they
global history that we've
invest
seen in the Inflation Reduction Act
if they
has
truly
created
believe
jobs all
climate change
across
was
the
a
country.
thing.
2000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio.
Let's talk about how much those renewable energies that they're so focused on would fuck the environment even more. Like mining lithium is horrible for the environment.
In North America,
Cobalt?
that's in Minnesota.
I mean,
but my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting.
500-year floods and droughts back to back.
Look, I harvest corn. I harvest soybeans.
Who is his constituents who have lived 1,000 years?
Oil at any time.
He harvests his soybeans. Of course, he harvests his soybeans.
Energy. So the solution for us is
he is
to
a soy
continue
boy.
to move forward.
Yeah.
That climate change
Soy
is real.
man.
Reducing our impact is absolutely critical. But this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the
They
future.
have built
not
7
just the current,
charging
and that's
stations.
What absolutely makes sense.
7.
Vance has to hit him on those new jobs weren't actually new jobs.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here.
Yes.
I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite.
Yes.
That's raised energy
Hydroelectric,
prices and also
nuclear.
meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by
your
the
time
climate.
is
These are
up.
the solutions.
Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium.
No,
on
we
that.
aren't.
We're producing more oil, but the folks know, and
Where?
like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not.
We are
folks that
importing
Green New
more
Deal folks. These are
oil
farmers
from
that have been
Venezuela.
drought
We're not
one year,
actually producing
massive flooding
anymore
the next
domestically.
year. They understand that
This
it
is the
makes
same
sense.
administration
Look,
that shut
our
down the
#1
Keystone
export
pipeline when it was
cannot be
about to
topsoil
open,
from
and then they
erosion from
helped
these massive
fucking make a
storms. We
Russian
saw it in
pipeline in
Minnesota
Europe.
this
Like, these
summer.
aren't serious people.
And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota,
We're thinking
starting
ahead
to
on this.
weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law
we're-
that was
we're
passed
planning for the
allows
global
us to
economy.
think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want.
as if
We
she's
can be
not asking
smarter
for their
about
money
that, and an
either.
all-above energy policy is exactly what she's
I love
doing.
how they break it down
creating
like
those
Trump
jobs
is
right
like
here.
Kingpin from fucking
Governor, your
Spider-Man
time
or
is
some
up.
shit.
The
Like
overwhelming
he's just like,
consensus
you're
among
going to
scientists
give
is
me
that
what
the
I
Earth's
want.
climate is warming at an
They're
unprecedented rate.
claiming
Margaret?
that he's the
Thank
most
you, Nora.
retarded person
We're
on
going
the
to turn
planet.
now to
and
immigration.
also the
The crisis
biggest
at the
genius,
U.S.-Mexico border
know,
consistently
on
ranks
the
as one
planet,
of
right?
the top issue for American voters.
Jen, are you asking
Senator
who's fact
Vance,
checking, like
Your
here or in the
campaign is
debate?
pledging to carry out the largest mass
Well,
deportation
they're also
plan
like
in
a
American
minute behind
history,
us, by the way.
and to use the
Oh, that's
U.S.
right. Yeah, yeah.
military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and
Yes.
separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to
See how he
stop
answers
the
this.
bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of
Do
Donald
not
Trump's
come.
border policies.
Do not
94
come.
executive orders suspending deportations,
come.
decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office,
look at how Walz just positioned himself
would be
after
saying,
that
you know
shit.
what? I screwed up.
Fucking mad.
Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that.
Look at him, bro. Look at his face.
He can't answer this.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting
Look at his face. He wants to respond,
using
but he's got no
kids as
substance.
drug mules, among other things?
Oh, what was he doing? Wiggling an earpiece?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis.
Wait,
This is
what's
the
not
opioid
true?
Crisis. And
Bullshit.
the good news on this is the last
How's
12
it not
months saw the
true?
largest decrease in opioid
Now he's
deaths in
talking
our
about
nation's
fentanyl?
history. 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work
No,
to do.
no.
But let's go back to this
When
on
you're not
immigration.
reporting
Kamala Harris
stats
is the Attorney General
appropriately,
of the
the
largest
numbers
state,
aren't
border
down.
state in California. She's the only
He
person
said
in this
30% in
race
Ohio. He
who
had that shit
prosecuted
rehearsed, bro.
transnational
He's got the
gangs
question
for human
beforehand.
trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this.
See him looking
Most
down
of
at
us
his
want
nose.
to solve this, and
We all want
is
to.
the
I
United
mean,
States Congress. That's the
some
Border
people want
Patrol
to solve
agents.
the problem.
That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's
motherfucker's
most
like-
Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It
Yeah.
was crafted
And the
by
Senate
a
refused to vote on
conservative
it.
senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border
No.
Patrol said this
No.
is what we need in here.
The piece
These
of
are the
legislation
experts.
you're talking
And the
about,
Chamber
Tim,
of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said
that was a
pass this thing.
funding bill
Kamala
for
Harris
Ukraine
helped
and
get there.
Israel.
1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money
Joe
to
Biden can
speed
just
up.
do whatever
these,
he wants. They don't need to pass
adjudications on this,
anything.
just what
The
America
only reason
wants.
why they needed to
But
pass
as soon
the
as
bill
I
is
was
because
getting
it was
ready
a
to
Ukraine
pass and
funding
actually
bill, as you
tackle
just
this,
said.
Donald Trump said no. Told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue.
Because it does
gives him
nothing to
what
fix
would
the
Donald
border.
Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done.
It did
by
nothing
the
to slow the
legislature. You
flow of
can't just
immigrants.
do this through the
It
executive
literally
branch.
said in the bill
So
that they were
look,
going to
we
allow
have the
up to a
options
certain
do
amount
this.
of border
Donald
crossings
Trump
every
had
day.
4
Like, what
years.
kind of fucking
It
bill is that?
wasn't going to trigger an alarm
And he
bell until
promised you, America, how
5,000
easy it would
illegal
be.
crossings
I'll
happen.
build you a big,
It doesn't
beautiful
include
wall,
anyone
and
under
Mexico
the
will
age
pay
of
for it.
18.
Less than 2%
And
of that
it
wall
doesn't
got
actually
built,
do
and Mexico
anything
didn't pay
until
a
about
dime.
8,000
But here we are
crossings,
again, 9 years after he
which
came
was
down that
absolutely
escalator,
no change.
dehumanizing
Unreal.
people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said
Very
that she
good.
enabled the
Very
Mexican
good
drug
answer, though.
cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop.
How could
Look,
they
I think
even
what
deny
Tim
that
said
to
just
Democrats?
doesn't
Everyone
pass the
fucking
smell
knows.
test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this.
How is he
talking
demonizing
about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together.
There's plenty
Senator
of
Langford
reporting
did it.
that actually
We
showed
could
that it
come
was
together
happening.
and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
So I'm going to fight talking points by
Governor, your time
starting
is
more
up. Senator,
talking
I'll give you
points.
1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree?
Well, they don't need any more funding.
That
They just need to
Congress
close the
controls
border.
the purse strings and would need to
Right?
support many of the changes that you
Like,
would
well,
actually.
why is it
want
always
to
throw money
implement?
at it?
You have
That's
1
not the
minute.
fuck.
Look, Margaret,
They got
first of
enough
all,
money.
the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern
Yes.
border more than our borders are. Kamala
Thank
Harris
you.
has been.
Yes.
And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans.
You don't have a
for
stray pet
scarce
problem
homes.
anymore,
The
though.
people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio,
right. Where do all
are
the
the
stray cats
American
go?
citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Look at the look on his face.
It is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of
He wasn't
continuing
prepared for
to
that
bring
one.
this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look,
Yeah, those
this
are the people
bill
supporting
also
Kamala.
gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This
No,
bill gets
because
it
we
done
shouldn't
in
have so
90
many
days.
asylum claims that
Then you
takes that
start to
long.
make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you,
fingers
Governor.
probably
And just to
burn when he
clarify,
touches the
for
Bible.
He knew
our
the border
viewers,
was gonna come up.
Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well,
Nora?
Margaret,
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret,
Thank
I
you,
think it's
Nora.
important
We're
because
going to turn out of the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys weren't
economy,
going to
we're-
fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Call
So
them
there's an
out.
application called the CBP One app, where you can go on
Damn, he
as
just
an
spoke
illegal
over them.
migrant,
He
apply
just
for
pulled his fucking
asylum
cock
or
out and
apply
he's like,
for
listen,
parole
I'm the man.
and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret.
I see
by
3,000.
Thank you,
our
Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal
And
process.
Get a higher
We
pitched
have
voice
so much to get
until he
to,
gets to
Senator.
Kamala's level.
Those
We have
laws
so
have been on
much-
the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
We
CBP
wanna have-
One app has not been on the books.
Since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen,
Nice.
the audience
talking.
can't hear you because your mics are cut. We
Keep
have so much we
talking.
want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
Damn,
Nora.
he didn't let
Thank you,
them
Margaret.
just fucking ignore that.
The
That was
economy
good.
is a top concern.
And he didn't elevate his
Each of
voice
your
either. He just
campaigns
stayed
has
calm.
released an economic
Yep.
plan. So let's talk about the specifics.
I mean,
Governor Walz,
like I said, I'm
Vice
not a
President Harris
JD
unveiled a
Vance fan.
plan that
He's
includes
handling himself
billions
very
in
well
tax
here.
credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit?
how he
Governor, I'll give you
sidesteps.
2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there
As
listening
Tim
tonight,
Pool
you're
said
hearing
today,
a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's
wearing a
good. It's healthy. That's what this is
$65,000
supposed to happen.
necklace.
You should be listening. How
He
this
is
gonna
far from
impact
middle
me?
class.
The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing
fact
goes,
check.
I've seen it.
Donald
in
Trump
Minnesota,
got that reduced to
12% more houses in
$35
Minneapolis,
before
prices
he
went
left
down on rent
office.
4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000.
I'm supposed to
child
believe
tax
that the
credit. We have
fucking
one in
party that got
Minnesota,
paid off by Big Pharma
reduces,
for the vaccine
childhood
on
poverty by a
fucking
third. We save
the
money in the
insulin
long
thing?
run,
Yeah,
and we
okay.
do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What
Joey,
happened
did
there
you get a
was
tax
an
cut?
$8
Because I did.
trillion increase in the national debt.
I remember it.
Ever. Now he's proposing
I don't comment on
20%
taxes.
consumption or sales tax
Well,
on
they are
everything we
theft.
bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be
But I know a lot of
destabilizing
people.
it.
I know a lot of
It
people
would
that got
inflation
tax cuts, even if it was just
to
like
a
fucking
recession.
3,000. Like
Look,
that's
this is
great.
simple
That's the
for you.
difference between
Where
a
are we going?
fucking family
Kamala Harris
vacation
is
and not
do
having
the
a
things she
family
wants to do.
vacation.
We'll just
Oh,
ask
yeah.
the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best. More people are participating in it. and
What is
folks
fair
have
share?
The things that they
So,
need.
push back. What is
Senator,
fair
I want to
share?
give you a moment to respond
Communist
on that. But
gobbledygook,
similarly,
that's
the
what-
Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says
Oh,
it
boy.
would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My
Oh,
question
would it?
is the same for you. How do you
Who's
pay
making
for
up
all
numbers?
that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, it's easy
Well,
when you
first
don't
of
know
all,
math.
You're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has
We'll hear
already
glug,
done it.
glug, glug.
Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity
Fucking-
to
where are they
enact
getting
all of
$6
these great
fucking
policies,
trillion
and what
from,
she's
bro?
actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class
wants everyone in
problems, then
poverty.
she ought to do them now, not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same
How would
economists
Trump's
attack
economic
Donald
plan
Trump's
cost
plans, and they have
500% more than
PhDs,
Kamala's?
but
That
they
doesn't
don't
make any
have common
sense.
sense, and they don't have
Well,
wisdom.
because they don't know
Donald
math,
Trump's
Joey.
economic policies
He's
have
literally
delivered
taking
the
off
highest
government regulations.
take-home
That
pay
by
in
in
a
itself would
generation in this
fucking
country.
generate money. So what does he
1.5%
possibly?
inflation, and to boot,
Well, they
peace and
don't know how to
security all
calculate
over the
the
world. So when
reduction of
people say that
regulation.
Donald Trump's economic
They
plan
don't
These
know
aren't
what
make
that
sense,
number is.
I say look at
We-
the record.
You know
He
what this is?
delivered
This is like-
rising
I'll wait
take-home
till he's
pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle class and working class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that
my
I'm proud
401k
to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream
far
again.
more than it did under 8 years of Obama.
Struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy.
What failure?
We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but
everything was ready to come back.
Since the Great
Before
Depression.
COVID, they were in a
9 million
manufacturing recession.
Yeah, that was
No,
day
no.
one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act,
Donald Trump didn't close anything
you
down.
Made a question about.
I'm still trying to figure out how Trump's
tax
economic plan is going to be six
can't
strides.
be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota.
Yeah,
not
listen to
Donald Trump.
Fauci.
And the same thing goes with this. And I ask
That's what he's
you
saying.
out
Listen
there,
to Fauci.
teachers,
He's an expert.
nurses, truck drivers, whatever. How is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years? And the last year as president. That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about
he's
that.
not
We're
doing
just
anything
asking for
illegal.
fairness
He's not
in it,
working
and
around
that's all
it.
you want.
You have a minute.
Previous
Governor,
Congresses
you say
have
trust
made
the
tax
experts,
plans.
but those same
that he is
experts
following the
for
laws.
40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the
they're watching Daddy
pharmaceuticals
on
that we
TV
put in the
right now.
bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and
Because
you
we're
want
not
billionaires to
retarded.
get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to
Look,
ship
I'm a
things
union
overseas,
guy.
but I understand.
I want to
that,
make
look,
things more
we
expensive
produce
for you.
soybeans and corn. We need to have fair.
I want to
trading
allow you to
partners.
hold
That's something that
everyone
we believe in.
hostage.
I think the thing that
So you can get paid
most
more.
concerns me on this is Donald Trump
I'm a
was the
union
guy
guy.
who
I'm a
created the
union guy.
largest trade deficit in American
You know-
history with China.
You know, the
So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the
mobsters were
senator
union
said right
guys,
there,
too.
I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I
wanna
watched
hold
it
us
in my
hostage.
communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right.
It really
to work
looks like
states made
he's
it more
reading
difficult.
somebody's
We had
teleprompter,
companies that were willing
honestly.
to ship it over,
Well,
and we
he-
saw
he's
people
got-
profit.
He's got that
Folks
crib
that-
sheet, you know, in his
folks that
hand. That's
are
why he keeps holding it
venture
up and
capital
looking.
in some
Oh
cases,
shit! I
putting
forgot
money
about
into
this.
companies that were
He's got, like,
overseas.
Post-its
We're in agreement
tied
that
to
we
his
bring
hands
those
going like
home.
this.
The issue is Donald Trump is
Where's your
talking about it.
pen?
Kamala Harris has a record:
Well,
250,000
maybe if
more
you
manufacturing
take Kamala's
jobs
lead and
just in out of the
close his
IRA.
fist a little
May I
bit, you
respond to
get
that?
somewhere.
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump
Notice
didn't
how
do
he
nearly
keeps saying
as good of a
Tim
job
Walz's
as the
last name
No, that's a gross
incorrectly.
that he
generalization.
did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman
Yes.
who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do
He's
so
like,
much better.
search
So
for the
all of you
key word,
watching,
find the
we can
corresponding
get back to
answer.
an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you, Margaret.
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen. on
He's
many
directing the
topics,
questions
but
now.
Right now, I want to talk
I hope we go to
about
this.
personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions.
Man.
We want to ask you about your leadership qualities.
Go to
Governor
Afghanistan.
Walz,
Go to Afghanistan. Come on.
you said you were in
Last
Hong
voice in the room.
Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989.
Fact check.
The Minnesota
False.
Public
He
Radio
was
and other
not
media
there.
outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year.
Oh,
Can you
they're actually
explain
calling him
that
out online?
discrepancy?
Yeah,
shit.
well,
Good.
the folks out there didn't get at the top of this. Look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska.
fucking who cares where you
town of
grew up, bro?
400. Town that
Yeah,
you
and your
rode
own
bike with
family
your
has
buddies till the
disowned you.
streetlights
They do
come on,
not
and I'm
want you
proud
to
of
be
that
vice
service.
president.
I
I
joined
grew
the
up in the
National
grimy
Guard at
streets of New
17,
York.
worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year
Now
out,
you're
I
an
got
old
the
teacher.
opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able
Not
to
June,
do that.
though.
I came
August.
back home
August.
and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams,
Where else
we
would you
would
take
take
the young
dancers,
people?
and we would go back and forth to China.
The
The issue
scout
for
camp.
that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can.
He's not
but
I've
even
I'm
told
not
answering
everybody
perfect,
for
and I'm a
I've told
knucklehead
everyone
at
for 40
times,
years
but
I was
it's
at
always
Tiananmen
been about
Square.
that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress,
you gonna call
I
him
was
out
You
for
one of
lied
the
to those same
bipartisan
people for 12
working on
years
things
now.
like farm bills that we
Brother,
got
this
done,
dude is
working on
Muhammad
veterans
Ali head
benefits.
weaving past
And
the
then
question.
the people of Minnesota were
Man.
able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment
are we doing
has been
introductions
from the
again?
beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that
Just
I
in
get
case you
this
forgot
right.
who he
I will
was.
say more
This is
than
Tampon
anything.
Tim, guys.
Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But
Oh,
being there,
listen,
the impact it made.
He's
the
apologizing
difference
for
it made in
lying
my
to you by
life.
saying
learned a lot
sometimes I
about
get caught
China.
up in
I
it,
hear the
so I keep
critiques
doing
of this.
more.
I would make the case that Donald Trump should have
that's what I
come
tell
on
my
one of those
exes.
trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID.
Xi
And I
Jinping?
guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand
lost
the
a trade-
world.
wait,
It's
what?
about trying to
How did
do
he
the
lose a
best
trade
you
war?
can for your community.
Those
And
tariffs
then
are
it's
still
putting
in
yourself out
place.
there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress.
Oh,
those are
good
the
soldier.
things that I
Ooh,
think are the
ooh, I
values that
hope
we
he gets
want
hit
to
on this
Look,
one.
Vance got that little smirk.
Governor,
Let's
just
see.
to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the
No, just-
discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that
Alls I
summer
said.
and misspoke on this. So
Oh,
I
fuck
was
No,
you.
you lied. You lied.
So I was
You
in
lied.
Hong
You
Kong
lied.
and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
You learned you could lie.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016,
No, go
you
back
called
to
your
that. Go
running
back to
mate
that.
Donald Trump
Military
unfit
order.
for
Go
the
now.
nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump
see if
the
he has a good
advice
answer for this.
he needs to hear and not just the advice?
This is a good question,
he wants
actually,
to
for him
hear?
to answer
You have
well
2
on.
minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews, is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. You pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing
All of
jobs.
them.
And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration. It's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you.
Now
Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but
that's what his own laws say.
This issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was.
I thought he said yes or no.
And overturned Roe versus Wade.
I'm sorry. I thought she said yes or no.
And then he tells us,
this isn't a yes or no.
Send it to the states.
Let's see if she follows up.
Sarah,
you didn't answer the
question.
question.
Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor.
These like fucking 1% reasons as to why 99 other fucking abortions, which are elective, should be legal.
And now she may have difficulty having children.
All these women just don't want a brand new pair of Nikes. That's all.
Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade.
There is no right.
We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But
you can't restore Roe v. Wade.
If you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies.
What Project
2025?
It's going to
more difficult, if not impossible.
Come on, say
it. Contraception.
Say Trump's
and limit
2025.
access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business. But those things
had
are
some
being
balls,
proposed.
maybe you wouldn't have infertility
and the
problems.
catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works.
Let the states.
This is basically
let the states decide.
Maternal mortality
10th Amendment.
Skyrocket in
10th
Texas,
Amendment.
outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota,
Hi,
we are
Betty.
ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies.
Yeah, like 0.001% JGR.
And, you know, I one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you,
read the law
about
it
this
is
idea
true
that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restricted
I'm still not
state.
hearing a yes or a
Because
no.
of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey.
She died
back and
2
forth.
years
The fact
later.
of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life
Really?
and your rights,
They
as
just people
basic
just lie,
as the
bro.
right to control your own body, is determined on geography?
It's
There's
not
a
even
very
1984.
real
It's
chance
worse.
Had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice
she had
President Harris
complications
talk
from a
about this
drug she
subject
got
and you
from
hear me
another
talk about
state
it, you hear us
that
talking
shouldn't
exactly
have
the same.
happened.
Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level.
No, Fox, we did not
anybody's
make a
trying to get
bingo
rid of
card.
that,
I
or at
didn't
least
want
I
anyone
hope
to have
not.
alcohol
Though I know the
poisoning.
Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too.
That's
we know
irrelevant
that
to
the
the fucking
options need
law.
to be available, and we make that true. We also make it we're a top
Lowest
3
teen
state
pregnancy rates
for the best place to raise children.
What's that have to do
But
with
these
when
two
someone
things
gets an
to try
abortion?
and say that we're pro-children, but we don't
no,
like
I
this,
won't say it.
or
This
you
is
guys are
mean.
pro-abortion. That's not the case at all. We are pro.
He's like, it's the lowest teen pregnancy rate. It's like, okay, well,
Harris is making the case.
They could all be getting abortions at 8 months. Like, what's the relevancy? There's no relevancy.
Tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman
or
drive
pregnancy rate
600
because
miles to try and get health care.
they need to get those kids out on a treadmill.
First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman.
It would be like if I led the NBA in points and then
and maybe
in my defense, I was like, but I got a lot of rebounds.
Explain this to me.
Like,
but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives. The doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion.
He signed this into law.
I think
That's
whether you're
true.
pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And
that's he's saying he didn't read the bill before he signed it.
Some of what we've seen. Do you want to force
Can't they just pull that bill up, bro?
Somebody
they can.
Because Kamala Harris
we have pulled this bill up.
Nuns,
we have pulled this bill up.
Conscience. We can
would you be able to pull that shit up and just put like a highlighter around a big circle, just
and
keep
make
circling?
the country more pro-baby and pro-family? But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something that this is a very simple proposition.
I hope we're not
These are women's
birthing
decisions
teens
to make about their healthcare decisions.
Hopefully they're birthed
and the
as babies.
physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law
Doctor
is
knows
written
best when to kill a
try and
baby
make a
that
point.
was
That's
born.
not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me.
Dr.
What was I wrong
That is
about?
not the way the law is written. Look,
the law is written exactly like
I've given
that.
this advice on a lot of things that
He should
getting
say,
involved,
pull that
getting
shit
engaged,
up.
That's been
Jamie,
misread.
pull
It was
that up.
fact-checked at the last debate. But the point
They're not
going to
fact
there's
check,
a
though.
continuation of these
course
guys
they're not.
to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this. Just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe,
it worked best for you,
That
Tim.
doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Tell them, bring it
Gentlemen,
up.
there's a
Pull
lot
up
to
the law.
discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Oh, wow.
I got my story, my Zelda story. You ready for my Zelda story?
All right, just 1 second here. Let's go over here for a minute.
You're right. You're right.
Tell me your Zelda story.
My Zelda story. I'll make it quick. So I'm playing Ocarina of Time on an emulator, of course. I got past the Fire Mountain place and then the Water Temple, and the game crashed today. And while it was crashing, I was also in the process of hitting the save state button. So then I look up and the shit's frozen, and I'm like, what the hell?
No.
So the game crashes. I try to load the save state. It's corrupted. I'm like, oh, fuck. So in the game, you can actually manually save, and it registers. So I checked to see what my load was, and it was like before the Fire Temple. I was like, oh, fuck, I got to do both of them again. Oh, man, horrible. Just started my day off rotten. But I think JD Vance is doing a good job so far. He's got very good answers. You could tell he was prepping. He was prepping hard.
Oh, absolutely. And he is bringing the level-headed demeanor that he's going to have to bring to be Donald Trump's vice president. There's no doubt about that. And he's actually bringing some pretty good intensity as well. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing that as?
He's got that look in his eyes. He's got that. People keep saying he's wearing eyeliner because he's trying to have that serious, you're not going to bully me face.
I'm okay with the goth kid. Goth kids need to grow up too.
Yeah, right. A bunch of MMA fighters paint their nails. It's all right.
This is diversity, guys.
Yeah, diversity.
Shouldn't that be celebrated?
Mm-hmm. Crap, man.
Oh,
how much time do you think we got?
Well, they said it was a 4-minute. They said that you have 2 4-minute breaks. So
all right,
we're an hour in, and we get 4 minutes.
I'll be right back.
Oh God. So guys, you in chat, what do you guys think so far? I mean, I've seen some of your comments. You're you just fact checked me. I'm right. Thanks, Pat. I hope that I'm right. I'm not taking any notes though. So you're gonna have to hold me accountable throughout this whole time.
The power within ourselves to be who we want to be.
Again, I'm actually shocked by his performance. I'm not surprised by what Tim Walz is doing though. He is completely deflecting. He is every time Vance hits a point, his eyes just go wide. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe you just brought this up. So at what point is he gonna say, nah, I've been bullshitting you this whole time? I mean, we know he's done that with the entire position on his military service, his time in China. He's not stopping, though. Welcome back, Joey.
Hey.
Oh.
Might get a cat cameo in a few seconds.
All right. Well, you got Tampon 10 up there. Aw, there's the cat.
Just go to lay down, bro. Please. Lay down. Not on my computer. No.
Well, they are treating Vance the same way as Trump, but Vance ain't having it, and he's lobbing nukes this whole time. It's been great.
Yeah, what you've seen, Elizabeth, is essentially what the whole debate's been. Vance is hitting him really solid on these things. Walz is getting frustrated and visibly frustrated too.
Now I got to ask Joey, so we can be fair and balanced here. What can Tim Walz do to turn this shit around?
He could stop looking so freaking crazy with his eyes, be a little bit more calm, and stop coming across as like he's coming across like he's losing and he's behind.
We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic
anybody who's read the Second
including
Amendment.
AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well,
If they
Nora,
made
on
it
that particular
possible,
case, I
yes.
don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff.
He almost
have to do
chuckled
better.
there. Did you hear
and
that?
I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic,
Yes.
we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense
hands out of the guns of the
solutions
criminals.
for how
Like
to do
Deadpool
that.
said.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is just your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. Right. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment
Vice president is what?
Is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure
not
this
a hunter.
out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can say
unconstitutional
problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that
red
won't
flag
allow
laws are just like
even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it. And I here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that.
But Donald Trump loves it, right? Is that what he's going to say?
Things that work.
Well, your running mate loves it
in Finland and seen some Finnish schools.
I mean, that's literally all his answers
they
have
don't
been.
have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There
Flair's
are
right. He's like,
reasonable
oh my God, a
things you
shooting.
can
It's
do
like, yeah.
to make a difference.
Welcome
It's
to New
not
York.
infringing on your Second Amendment. And the
Yes.
idea to
Yes,
have
it is.
some of these weapons out there, it just
The
doesn't
right
make any
to keep
sense.
and bear
Kamala
arms
Harris,
shall
as an
not
attorney
be
general,
infringed.
worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want
What's a
your
mandatory
schools
gun
hardened to
buyback
look like a
program,
fort?
Joey?
Is that what we have to go when
What
we
is that?
know there's
What is
countries
a
around
mandatory
the
gun
world
buyback
that their
program?
children aren't practicing?
What
these
Australia
sounds like-
did.
they're being
That sounds like
kids.
we're taking
We
your
owe it to
guns.
them to
Does it
get a
not?
fix.
Yeah,
These are things
yeah,
that
mandatory
shouldn't be that
buyback,
difficult.
like,
You can still
we'll give
keep
you
your
money for it at
firearms,
least.
and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight,
Yeah,
this
I'd prefer to
breaks
have
your
the gun,
heart.
not the money.
Senator.
Tim, first of all,
Yeah,
I didn't know that
imagine
your
that.
17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I
I
hope that he's
appreciate
doing
you
okay.
saying so.
Christ have mercy. It is awful, and I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse.
Mental
We
health
have
abuse.
way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of
We got a lot
anxiety.
of that rates of
We
that.
unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that
Bring
we
up
need to
RFK,
get
bring
to
up
the root
RFK,
causes
bring
of,
up
because I don't think
RFK.
it's the whole reason why
Brainworm?
we have such a bad gun violence
Unity-
problem,
Unity
but I do think
thing.
it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA,
Hey, guys,
I was NRA guy for
I-
a long
wait,
time.
wait, wait,
Safety.
wait,
ho, ho.
Safety. I'm of an age
He just
where
said he became friends
my
with school
shotgun was in my
shooters.
car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today.
Well, I mean,
and
that's the
several
kind of
things I wanna
company he's
mention
gonna
on
keep.
this is
That's what he said.
talking
That's who
about
he's,
cities
that's
and
who
where
he's going to
it's
bring
at.
into the Oval
The
Office
number
with
one
him.
where the most
Bro.
firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural
But
suicides.
hey, guys, look, I have an
and
assault
we have
pen.
an epidemic of
It's my assault
children
weapon.
getting guns and shooting
I
themselves.
can do
And
damage
so
with this.
We
Are you
have,
going to take
and
that
we
away,
should
Tim?
look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that. But I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are
Really?
things that you can do about it.
How many
But I
guns have
do
just
think
got
that
off the
this is
shelf
one-
by
and I think this is
themselves
a healthy
and went and
conversation.
shot somebody, Tim?
I think there's a capacity
How
to
many?
find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
How many
you, Nora.
guns have loaded themselves
Let's turn now to
and
the
went out
top
and shot
contributor
somebody?
to inflation, the high
At least
cost of
11%.
housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the
Not
high
only did he
housing
bring up
crisis.
Sandy Hook, he literally said he's
Governor
friends
Walz,
with school
the
shooters. That's
Harris
what he said.
campaign promises
Am I going
a
crazy? Isn't that what he said?
$25,000
No,
down
that is what
payment
he said.
assistance for first-time home buyers
Said he's friends with
and a
school shooters.
$10,000 tax credit.
This is
They
insane.
also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
Yes.
No, it's not handing out. We have first. Let
Just
me say this.
like
This
student
issue of
loans.
housing.
We're going
and
to
I
give
think
you
those of
money.
listening on
We're
this,
going to
the
guarantee
problem
you
we've
money
had
to go
is
buy a home.
That we've got a lot
What
of
does that
folks
do?
see housing as
Th-
another
These
commodity.
moderators are obviously
It can be
biased
bought
towards
up, it
Walz,
can
but
be
they're doing it
shifted,
a lot
can be
better than
moved
the fucking
around.
last ones.
Those are not folks living in those houses.
They're at
Those of
least
you
like
listening tonight,
softly
that
calling
house
them
is a
on their
big deal.
shit.
I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. How much is a dozen eggs, Tim? We get it back from people because here's what we know.
What's the electric
bill? People with stable
like?
Housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that,
all about aborting.
Create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, on as far as your campaign's position,
someone
the
who lives in New
promise
York
is
City,
to seize federal
it's
lands to
absolutely
build
a problem.
homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices.
Yeah,
Where are
how
you
can
gonna
it
build
not?
all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens in this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive.
Oh, yeah,
if you open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
And it's not even
Senator Vance, you still have
government
23
intervention.
seconds there. Do you want to answer?
23 seconds.
Yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts.
How is she not?
It's not true. Look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office.
No, they're not.
Again, blaming
They just,
and not
they literally just lie.
I want the numbers. I want to see the actual numbers.
And I think when people hear federal land, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the country,
Tim Walz should just go on stage and say, I could do a 360 dunk. Believe me.
Around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this. And I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still.
Well, they had to make those investments because they burnt Minneapolis to the ground.
Senator Vance, you said
They had
you
to
don't
make
like the
those
economists.
investments
Which
because
economists are saying that it is immigrants
needed
that's adding
to.
to the cost?
Governor,
Where's
your
the study?
time is
Tim Pool
your
tweeted
time
out
is up.
the
But Senator, on
his
that
friends at school
point, I'd
shooters
like for
line.
you to clarify there are many contributing factors.
That's going to be
he
the,
said it.
See, that's
housing
going to be
costs. What
that's
evidence
going to
do
be
you
the
have
meme that comes
that
out of this
immigrants
this
are
debate.
part of
The
this
right's already won the
problem?
meme war.
Well, there's a
They're
Federal
going to win the
Reserve
meme war.
study that we're happy to share
They're gonna
after the
put,
debate. We'll put it up
Dylan
on
Roof
social
on
media,
next
actually,
to
that
Tim
really
Walz.
drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of
I've been saying
builders.
the
We're a
Biden
country
Harris
of
regime.
doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly
But we
have
can't
a
do
federal
any of those
administration
things with
that
all the
makes it harder
regulation.
to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in
If you want an
jail
example of
for not doing
leftist
everything
regulations, try to get the
exactly as
gun
Kamala
legally in New
Harris
York.
says they
Holy
have to
shit, there's
do.
so much
And what that
regulation.
means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal
Whoa.
regulations? I deal with this as a
Mic
governor.
drop right there.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry.
He doesn't even know the
I get
regulations.
this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. That in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make
regulations
sure
are
that
the
it's
fucking-
fireproof
the
and
gas.
those types of things. So
That's-
which are the
that's a federal
regulations?
regulation
Because
that's
the
affecting
vice
the
president's
housing
not
market.
responsible for
more
those. Congress
delivery.
writes those.
Governor,
From,
thank you,
cock
gentlemen.
hired to deliver wood.
We have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis.
Literally
I can
trickle
tell.
down
But
for a
Nora?
reason.
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator
Here we
Vance,
go.
at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you
Bring up RFK,
explain
bro.
how that would work?
What
And
what
can
is
you
he supposed
guarantee
to
that
do?
Americans with pre-existing
Tell everyone now what his
conditions
plan is so
won't
Kamala can
pay
adopt it?
more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe,
Well, every time
members
they
of my
tried to
family
repeal the
actually got
Affordable Care
private
Act,
health insurance, at
they
least for the
always
first
said
time,
you
switched
need
off
to
of
have
Medicaid onto private insurance for the first
pre-existing
time
conditions
under
covered.
Donald Trump's leadership. And I
They
think
weren't
that
going to remove
a lot
that.
of people have
And
criticized
it's
this
still been
concepts
voted
of a
down
plan
by
remark. It's very
Democrats.
simple
Mhm.
common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12
They
years
just don't
in
want that
Congress,
defeat of
you're
it
not
getting
going to
repealed.
propose a
That's why.
900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill, but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important
So it's your
is
fault.
I come from a major healthcare state.
He was there at
home
the creation
Mayo
of the
Clinic,
ACA.
home to Medical
Bro,
Alley.
that was like
3M,
12 years ago.
Medtronic, all
That's
those.
not a
We
flex, though.
understand healthcare.
That was like
It's why we're
14
ranked
years ago.
first
I was
on
there too,
affordability
bro.
and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is
What,
under
what was
Kamala
that,
Harris,
2009 or 2010?
more people are
Yeah, bro,
covered
we
than
were
they
all
ever before. And those of you
we were all
listening,
there.
this
Yeah,
is critical to
2008,
you.
2009.
Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants you. Go back
Like,
and remember this. He
I was
ran
18 years
on
old.
the
I was
first thing he
there.
was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On
And
day
he
one,
tried.
he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
And
he's
he
admitted
would
he
have
wants to repeal it.
the
This
ACA
isn't like
had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions.
imagine
If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad.
imagine
If
being
you're a
like
woman,
John
probably
McCain.
not.
Fuck yeah.
Broke your foot
Dick
during
Cheney.
football,
Fuck yeah.
might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10
No, Joe
drugs that
did.
will come online. The most
Joe did.
common
Kamala
ones that'll
didn't
be
do
there.
shit.
But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But
Why?
what Senator Vance just
What, are you
explained
saying your kid
might
wouldn't be
worse
honest with
than
you
the
then?
concept. Because what he explained
Donald
is
Trump was honest. He's
pre-Obamacare.
not going to come
And
up
I'll
with a
make this
fake
as
plan.
simple as
He's got
possible because
ideas.
I have done this for a long time.
Until you put it
What
in
they're
practice,
saying is,
isn't
if
any
you're
plan just a
healthy,
concept?
why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Hey, what about Joe
Governor, thank you.
promising
Senator,
to
you
cure
have
cancer?
not yet explained how you would protect people with
I bet
pre-existing
you a lot of
conditions.
people are
or
wishing
lay
Joe
out
would
that plan.
follow through on that.
Look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Not just
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've
It
seen
was
it go
good. He
up. Look,
talked
people
about
using
the
the system
700 a
works.
month,
And
1,500
the question about this of young people,
deductible
whatever, that's the
plus a
individual
fee
mandate piece of
if
this.
she didn't pay for the
Republicans
insurance.
fought
Like,
tooth and nail
unbelievable.
saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well,
As
then
someone who
why
has a
haven't
condition, it became so difficult for me to see my specialist doctor. I had to go to a doctor that would refer me then to their pulmonary doctors before they realized they would send me outside. It was total red tape. It was stupid.
Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people,
how are you incentivizing young, healthy kids to be in a market
when you get sick
that
and
costs
old,
them such a
it's there for you?
ridiculous
Because I
amount of
heard
money
people say, well, I don't
to
want
pay
to
for
buy
the
into
old
Medicare
people?
or whatever. Good luck.
You know what else would help us lower our healthcare costs?
So look, the ACA
If
works.
we
It can
put
continue
RFK
to
in
be
charge
better.
of why they're
Kamala Harris
poisoning
did
our
that.
food.
The way
That
she
would
made
make a lot
everything
of people
better
healthier.
was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for
And
the
we would
first
be
time
able
in
to
American
afford
history.
health care.
Thank you.
Actually,
Well,
most of our health care would
I
probably just be
apologize.
for
We're out
people
of
with
time. We have a number
pre-existing
of subjects
conditions
to
because we wouldn't need to
discuss.
worry about
Let's
the
talk
healthy
about
people
families
who are
in
eating themselves
America.
into a diabetic coma.
There is a
is
child care
ridiculous.
crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you.
Put a bullet in my
How
head.
long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have
as long as they want.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what
Is it negotiable?
Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company.
Aren't there countries in
We're
Europe
home
where
in
you have
Minnesota
3
to some of the
years
largest Fortune 500 companies
that we have to keep
Kamala
paying
Harris
for?
knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota
they're also paying
has to pay
for
family and
people to
medical
travel
leave.
for
You have a child,
abortions.
and I had to go back to work
Because
5
that's
days
cheaper
after
than-
my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better.
I think
they stay in their employers. We get more consistency.
6 months
in
is
that.
probably
so
fine.
Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We
And
implemented it in Minnesota.
maybe
And we see growth.
the places
That's
of
how you
employment that a
become
wife and a husband work at can
it's
negotiate times where they can both be
negotiations
home,
on it,
at
and
least one
here's
of them
the
with the
issue.
baby. That'd
Those
be
big companies are able to offer it. Those of
scheduling.
you out there who
Just line the
don't have it,
scheduling up, just like
just
they
imagine
do in
what
like
happens if you get cancer or
like
your
sports
child
events
gets
and
sick.
concerts. They
We know
got to
what happens.
align
You
so
end up
there's no
staying
scheduling
home. In
conflicts.
some
Like
places,
they could
that
pull
means
something like
no
that off.
paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those
I guess I'm one of the
tax
wealthiest
breaks
amongst us
to the
because it
wealthiest.
was doing good
He's
for me.
willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to
You know what's funny
the families
about
or
that
go to the
statement?
businesses and ask them.
How many
as far as
billionaires were on
childcare
stage at
on
the
this,
DNC?
You have to take it at both the supply
All
and
of
the
them.
demand side. You can't expect the most important people
How many
in our
billionaires
lives to
support
take care of our
Kamala?
children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks
70% of
to
money in the
get
pot.
into that
What
business
is it, like
and to make
70%
sure
of the?
folks are able to pay for that. We
What
were
was
able
that
to do
thing
it in
Tulsi said
Minnesota,
the
and
other
I'm
day?
still telling you this.
70% of like the
We were
money in
listed as
politics
the
is all
best
going
state
to
where
like
still in
they're the
crisis
party
on
of the
this.
rich now, or
Federal
the
program of
wealthy.
paid family and medical leave and help with this
The
will enhance
bourgeoisie.
our workforce, enhance our families, and make it
If
easier
it was
to have
true,
the
Donald
children that you
Trump was
want.
Governor,
truly
your
giving
time
the
is
tax
up.
breaks to the
Senator,
billionaires,
do you support a
wouldn't
national
they
paid
support
leave
him
program?
instead?
And if so,
Yeah.
for how
No,
long
they said
should
they gave
employers
tax
be
credits to the
mandated
rich. So
to
I
pay
guess
their
by that
employees
definition,
while they
since
are
we're in
home
America,
taking
we're
care
all
of their
rich.
newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats too have worked on this issue, and I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but
She
is
is pretty
also
hot.
a very, very brilliant corporate litigator, and I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important
Hey, that's a good
substantive
choice to
difference
support.
between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because look, it is
he's agreeing.
unacceptable.
Tim's agreeing.
And,
Look at that.
you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between
I think
going
Tim's
to
gonna
work
vote
or
for Trump
taking
now,
care
too.
for their kids. That is
Listen
an
to this.
incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also
Tim
said,
Walz looks like
Senator
he's
Vance,
panicking.
many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend
Oh, get rid
nearly
of
as
that.
much on childcare as they do on
I
housing
don't give a
each
fuck what the
month.
Federal Reserve says,
So I want to
bro.
get your
They're the most
thoughts
criminal
on this.
organization we got.
President Trump
It'd
recently
be like
said,
Don Corleone says, in
as
order to
much as
bring down
childcare
housing
is talked
prices,
about as
it's like,
being
oh,
expensive, it's relatively
I mean, more
speaking
Don.
very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship
All
their
about the
products back into our
penalizing.
country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. cut taxes for American workers and American families, cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the childcare shortage?
JTR super chat.
Tim
Who
said,
looks more scared during his debate,
we
Biden
just
or
don't have
Walz?
enough resources going into the
Biden.
multiple people
Biden
who
looks
could be
so
providing family
bad.
care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look,
I mean,
we're
you
going to
gotta
have to
get-
spend
gotta
more
factor
money.
in
We're going to have
Tim's
to induce more
expressions, though.
people
Look
to
at
want to
him.
provide
It's
child
'cause
care
of his
options for American
eyebrows.
families. Because the
Yeah,
reason
eyes
it's
get
so
wide.
right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has
Just make things
promised?
affordable, bro, and it won't be that big of a deal.
Well, if these members of Congress were listening to anybody, I can tell you. And
If these things were
this is the
affordable, women wouldn't
issue.
even have to
Everybody
fucking
listening
work while they
tonight
take
knows.
care
I
of
mean,
a
I'm sure they
child.
were
Like,
shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that plays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's
What?
because we got out of an imbalance on this.
In this
We thought we
economy,
were gonna get by by not
$6,000
paying
does not
people. I don't
last
think
you
Senator
3 or
Vance
4
that-
months.
and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarship types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another 4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing.
They're burning it down.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy.
Did he just try to
the
tell me
top
that
issue
fucking big
for
businesses
Americans
are
after the
thinking
economy
about
and
childcare
inflation?
before they're thinking about
After
tax
the
credits?
2020
Yeah,
election,
okay.
President Trump's
Yeah.
campaign and others
Bullshit.
filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges,
Based.
including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said
No,
there was no
they did not.
widespread
They did not
fraud.
look at the evidence.
The governors
they just
of
threw the
every
cases out. They
state
didn't look
in
at
the
shit,
nation,
bro.
Republicans
You don't have
and
standing. We're not
Democrats,
looking at shit.
certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance,
See, they're
you
not gonna
have said
fact
you
check,
would
but the
not
questions
have
are gonna be
certified
shitty.
the last
Let's see how
presidential
Vance does.
election.
You gotta
It would have
bring this
asked
shit
the
up.
states to submit alternative electors. That has been called
Looks like he's
unconstitutional and illegal.
It's been done multiple
Would
times.
you again seek to challenge this year's election results?
Even Hillary
if
had
every governor
alternate
certifies
electors.
the results.
Mhm.
I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration.
A pushback
I
on the
believe
court
that we
cases.
actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given
Maybe
that I was
35.
raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences.
He was losing me a little bit, and then he got to this.
Fellow Americans, Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Very good.
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things. I think I might have with the senator, but
me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he did. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag. Several later died, and it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds.
One had an unrelated stroke afterwards.
Marching to the governor's residence, and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police.
My son and
that
his dog.
Issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes
was it adjudicated? Where was it adjudicated?
Winning an election, you shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win.
Bring up Hillary Clinton. Please bring up Hillary Clinton.
Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter.
Wanting to
a president's words
Donald Trump in jail?
People hear
what
that.
you're talking about?
So
they literally have a hearing to sentence Trump in mid-November.
Ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th.
This isn't closing statements, right? He's got to have a chance to respond.
That a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are.
It is not the first time.
In the same boat.
The year 2000, for God's sake.
When this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Oh, hold them to that.
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years.
Hillary Clinton denying the election.
Shake hands after this debate and after
Hillary
this
Clinton
election.
did not accept the results of the 2016 election until 4 months ago.
He'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time.
Good job,
and if we want to
Vance.
say that
It's like he didn't know that this was coming for an answer ever.
I don't even think it was 500. I think it was $100,000. Was it even 500?
I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look,
You're right. It wasn't
understand
Facebook ads. It's not related.
But the issue was that happened.
It was fueled by the actual media.
All of us say there's no place for this.
Not social media. The actual media.
Repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up.
Yeah, there's more books banned in California than Florida.
Tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald
telling
Trump's
me
inability
that
to say
many
he is still
armed
saying
conservatives
he didn't
were
lose the election.
such
I would
a
just
threat?
ask that.
Oh
Did
wait,
he lose the 2020
unarmed
election?
conservatives.
Tim, I'm focused
such a
on the
threat to this
future. Did
country's
Kamala
democracy.
Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Yes, you can.
That's the
Yes,
test.
yes, you can.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to
Please.
respond to you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out
of course
there
you don't.
who refused, and now again,
His
and this,
buddies
I'm
do.
pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look,
Who is in the White House right
Mike
now, Tim?
Pence made
Who
that
is in the White
decision
House?
to certify that election? That's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it?
Hey,
That's
Joey,
what we're asking you, America.
I think Tim needs
Will
to
you
change his
stand
tampon.
up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree.
At least
She
a
wouldn't
diaper.
have picked me if she didn't think I would do that. Because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Maybe someone should bring
Governor,
up
your
Jamie
time
Raskin's
is
recent
up.
comments.
Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
What was it going to be? Closing statements next, probably.
Probably.
Fuck, man. Like, they just like the unfettered lying that Democrats can do without any pushback. Really, is all you need to know about who you should vote for.
I mean,
like,
Jamie Raskin has literally said, if Democrats have the majority in January, if Trump wins, they are going to refuse to certify the results.
yeah. So what will their excuse be then? Well, it's okay when we do it because he's a convicted criminal. Like, is that they're going to be their gobbledygook?
Yes, that he's literally said that's exactly why.
Yeah. So like they just say things like they just literally say words. There's no substance behind the words they say. They just say the actual right thing that they think people want to hear, and then they just don't do that. They don't do it. They just man, I would be curious to see how a debate this time around would go on Fox News, because Fox is not even like, they're not like this beacon of like right wing extremism like the left calls them. Like, I wonder if they would even fact check. Like, even if they did a little bit more, then it would make a big difference.
I kind of want to see a Greg Gutfeld commentary of this debate.
The problem
you know what I
is,
mean,
though,
right?
Yeah, the problem. Yeah, like what he like responds over it, like the way Crowder does it.
Oh yeah, I mean he would tear this apart.
Yeah, but like the right's always agreeing to like the worst possible fucking moderators, and the left, they won't even touch it. They won't touch someone who would actually ask impartial questions like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan would not be on either one. Like, he would ask impartial questions and he would fact check everybody. They can't have equal fact checking. It's ironic how they always talk about diversity, equity, inclusion when they there's none of that for them. It's always like make just like
Joe Rogan would ask the most difficult questions of both people.
Exactly, and they can't have.
Wouldn't be a softball. It wouldn't be a 5-sentence lead up explaining what we want you to answer. It'd be, here's the question, go.
Yeah. They can't have equal treatment, equal scrutiny. They can't have that. It's ironic how they want equality for all, equity, but they can't stand equal scrutiny. It's like so unbalanced. It's like 90% favorable for them, 10% slight pushback.
And why are debates on these networks anymore anyway?
Because
why
that's
not
all
host one
Democrats will
next?
agree to. No, that's because Democrats won't agree to that. They will not agree to that. They need everyone to be on their side.
Why do conservatives agree to do these debates then?
Because they're willing to come to the table and get their voice out there for people to hear. Because they're more about their principles than the left.
That is absurd.
I know it's absurd.
100% absurd.
I wouldn't. Man, I'd at least want one moderator to be someone who's going to be balanced. That's the bare minimum of what they should agree to. Be like, listen, you could have 2 moderators, but I'm choosing the third.
Yeah.
You got to start slowly inching back to fairness.
You know, and if you're going to fact check, I want fact checking on both answers.
Mm-hmm. I want Jamie to be sitting there with a typewriter, just fact check. Ding.
Yeah. This is beyond absurd. And hopefully, I mean, closing statements are going to get some good things out of Vance.
Mm-hmm.
He is surprised and impressed me thus far.
I agree. He's done very well. He's very well prepared. He's not losing. He's stringing a sentence. There's good pacing to his words. He's not like stopping and saying words to help remember his ideas. He's got it all out. He's got it all. He knows it all.
Right.
The closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So
Damn,
Governor Walz,
coin toss.
They're outsourcing coin tosses to AI. What the fuck, man?
CBS News, and most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there.
Bernie
and they
Sanders
don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people.
Taylor
They believe
Swift.
in a positive future of this country, and
What a
one where our
sentence.
politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you that
Dick Cheney.
that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that
Cheney.
freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room,
No,
but
you have the freedom
for you to
from
make choices
the government
about
doing
yourself.
that shit.
Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will
He did
stand
what?
with Donald Trump's
American
agenda.
Carnage? What is it, like a comic book or some shit?
Push down that road.
What
Excuse
wars
me.
did he start? What carnage
Kamala
did he
Harris
create?
gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala
Alls we
Harris is
have.
bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy.
if Vance was
She's
smart, he
bringing
would bring
real
up Tim's
solutions for
family
the
all
middle
not
class,
supporting
and
him.
she's centering you
hope
at
he
the
does.
heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where
Peacefully make
everybody
your
gets
voices
that
heard.
opportunity and
That's not-
everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor
Boo.
Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe,
Hey,
as a
Brian.
person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies.
No. Remember,
I believe that whether you're rich
Thanksgiving
or
was
poor, you
16
ought to be
cents
able to
cheaper
afford to
this
buy a
year.
house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that too has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day.
Ugh, 5 weeks.
I'm done with this.
Yeah, fuck.
Wow.
Well, I think Vance did the job he needed to do. He did a great job. And honestly, Walz he was like I expected. He was going to be belligerent. He was going to be, his body language was so emotional. He looked like he was nervous and weak. And he had this, I think Elizabeth Biddy said before, he had like this high pitched, like squealy voice thing going, like he was whining.
Well, he was trying to get to the I'm speaking, and he had to get in Kamala's voice to be able to do that.
A lot of times he looked like he had such danger in his face, and he's just like looking down at his notes, and he's just like you could tell he was probably sweating bullets.
I mean, we all know about fight or flight. Well, he was in the freeze mode. He couldn't fight. He couldn't run away.
He froze.
Like, shit, I don't know what to say to this, which is why he never actually answered any of the questions.
Yep. Fight or flight or freeze. He froze. Simple as that.
Well, I'll be interested to see what the, post debate polling says, but I'm going to give this to Vance. Personally, yeah, I'm going to give it to him.
Bro, this was a 10-8 round.
Oh, absolutely.
10-8 round. Like, for anyone who's watched MMA out there, that second Frankie Edgar Gray Maynard fight, it's like that first round. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up and you'll understand.
So, with that, Joey, I'm going to say thank you for coming along this journey with me. Testing out the streaming capabilities because I had to learn this to be able to do it.
Hey, listen, you got it good on your first try.
Hey, I got lucky.
It's more than some people can say.
You must have manifested it for me.
Listen, I got the powers. I read The Secret. I read the book The Secret. I know what you got to do. You can't use any negative connotations when you speak. That's how you manifest. You can't be
very true.
I won't do it, or I must. You have to be like, I must, I will do it.
I have done it.
Please don't let this happen to me, God. Please don't. No, you can't use the word don't. You're going to say, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be all right.
No, stop. Punctuation matters. Yes. So with that, Joey, thank you for sticking around. I'm going to ask you to hang around for about 5 extra minutes here after I hit end. Thank you to everybody who watched along. Especially thank you to the people who sent in super chats. That is a huge thing for me. Thank you. And I will have to find a way to Venmo Joey some money now. So
just we'll figure something out.
Maybe I'll buy you some Popeyes.
Oh boy, that you just know the way to my heart.
Hey, Joey eats cannolis.
Subscribe to Chris's shit. Well, I don't know where you can find me yet. I'll start doing things at some point. But you can always hang out in my Discord, which I don't have a link for because you guys are all in there probably.
I will try to put it in the description later. But guys, like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. We will see you on the next opportunity. Maybe there'll be another Trump Kamala debate, and I'll fire up the stream for that again. With that, you all have a great night.
Good night.
All right.